you back on? Did we get some folks moved over?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to initiate this. I'm Gary Green, I'm the genealogist general, and this is a continuation of the training that we've been doing. And what I found out was people were saying, I've got one thing I think we need to see. And some of the rest of you may have this same concept that you need to pass on information you have to the rest of the registrars and genealogists across the nation. So if you have a program that you're willing to present so that the rest of us can pick up on it, I welcome that. Tonight, I got an invitation or a recommendation from Ralph Nelson, who has 25 years of being a registrar in Delaware, Florida, and now North Carolina. And each time that he's moved, he's had to pass on his registrar duties to someone else. And he's gained enough experience, I think, to be able to pass some of that information on to us. And this, what I see this as, if you are a state point of contact or you're ready to pass on the information to someone else, how do I do that? What am I going to do to make that transition work? And I think Ralph is going to have that, have an answer that'll allow us to see a different viewpoint of what it takes to be a chapter registrar. And I know we all have good viewpoints on being chapter registrars, but we need to start someplace and then we need to branch out from that. So I'm going to ask Ralph if you'll take over and share your screen and give your information. We'd appreciate it.
Oh, are we there? Yes. It says, can you see my screen? If you can just
Yes.
nod. Yeah. Okay. Good. So we'll try and get us started up here. I want to thank Gary for the opportunity to present the information about this new website that I put together for SAR chapter registrars. I also want to thank John Kokowicz, who's the chapter registrar for the General Francis Nash chapter here in North Carolina, for his advice on the structure of this presentation. I just put in the chat box the URL and my email address, so you can copy the chat box and you will have that information. Otherwise, I'm readily available, easy to get to here. So what is the website intended to do? It's intended to help new chapter registrars work with prospects to help prepare simple applications easily, and also to help all chapter registrars help them with the prospects, especially to find documentation in complex cases that have got obscure relationships. I know we've been talking about that throughout this series of lectures, and this is a website that kind of puts it all together in one place. This is the preview. I'm first going to show a series of what we used to call slides that talk about what it is we're trying to accomplish, and then sort of take a walk through the website so that you can see what it looks like and where the various pieces are. This is a successive reveal talk, and so I've got points that show up here. And one of the things we're going to talk about is 5 different stages of going through the application process. And also we're going to talk about 3 different types of applications, kind of obvious here, simple ones, moderately complicated ones, and really complicated ones. There are going to be a lot of direct links to free resources on here so that you won't have to have on your own computer a whole lot of different favorites, but you can just come to this one source and get the links to the major sites that are used. The goal that I'm working toward is membership, not perfection. It's one of the several tensions that a chapter registrar gets into. You know, how much more effort should we put into getting additional information before we send the thing in? Before we all get frustrated with the amount of time it takes and so on, just to get that one additional death certificate. Also going to emphasize the fact that sources that are unacceptable or documentation that's unacceptable for the SAR can still be very useful to you in finding acceptable information or giving you hints about how you can put together a proof statement. And it will have tips for organization and evaluation of the documents that you get. For the simple cases, you don't really need a whole lot of organization and evaluation because you're only going to be using a birth certificate and the brothers or fathers or cousins application. But for more complex cases, you need to have some idea of organizing the material and evaluating it. And that's going to be making use of a spreadsheet, which kind of maps the location of the data. And we'll also have a little bit of information on how to fit the application to the page. And the little hash mark at the end here is what I put on here to indicate that it's the last dot on the page, so to speak. And if you want to take a screen grab of this, that would be the time to do it. Now, you're not going to need to do that because Gary's been posting these things on the internet, so they have this posted on there later on. Okay, rationale and incentive. Why did we do this, and what's going to be good about having this kind of a website available? We depend on members in order to deliver the programs, and every member leaves either by stopping paying dues or dying. And so if we don't gain new members, we won't have an SAR anymore. And at this point, all of the applications need to go through chapter registrars. And consequently, if we don't do the job properly, we're going to lose the organization. So we play a vital role in sustaining the SAR. And I think that chapter registrars need to appreciate the fact that they are playing an important role within the organization. And the thing that got me started on this, so to speak, was the feeling that we need more helpful material to go to the registrars and fewer policies. I think policies are important and necessary, and we need to pay some attention to them. But rather than telling people what they need to do and what they shouldn't do, we need to help them find what they need to get in order to complete a successful application. Well, I talked about the 5 stages in here. And through these 5 stages, the process, chapter registrar has got a lot of opportunities for getting the prospect to become interested in the SAR, to know a little bit about it, and become committed to the chapter's programs and the SAR's goals. A lot of people want to get a certificate on the wall and say, well, I've proved that my ancestor was really there. But there's more to the SAR than saying, yes, I filed a successful application. We'd like them to participate with us. And the chapter registrar is one of the first ones to have an opportunity to push that information to the prospect. We do it in part through the welcome, in which we make the prospect feel as though this is a group that he wants to belong to. Then we get into research to find out what's necessary to file a successful application. After we get the research, then we write the application. And I emphasize that because in many cases, we tell the prospect we'll go off and start an application, and they put all sorts of stuff down, which we later have to take out and put in new stuff. And that upsets the applicant somewhat. And it is easy to get lost in terms of where did I get this piece of information from? Should I leave it in the application, or does it need to be changed, or what not? And then there's the signing process, in which we talk with the prospect about checking over the application, getting the correct amount of money, finding sponsors for the signature, and sending it, putting other material in with the application as necessary, making sure we have marked up docs that are appropriate, and getting that into the state registrar. And the last part of this, I say rejoice. In a sense, we don't consider that to be part of the chapter registrar's duties, but on the other hand, it is appropriate for the chapter registrar to be one of the first people to find out about the fact that he's been accepted, and to send him a little note saying that the certificate and other materials will be coming along shortly. And we look forward to seeing him at the meeting to provide him with that, he and the family. I put this slide in to indicate what the blocks of documentation are that we're looking for. There are sort of several different blocks. First of all, there's the applicant and the immediate family that pretty much everybody knows about, and frequently they have these documents readily available to them. Then comes the documents that are between 1850 and 1900, which is 1850, of course, is the first census that listed all the people in the family. And this requires a little bit of research to find this information. Next, we go back into the period where the census does not provide a great deal of help. And so it takes a little bit more effort to determine the birth, marriage, death, and where they may have moved from one state to another for generations 7 to 10. And of course, we got the patriotic service documents, which, if you're fortunate, you have a relative that has already proven patriotic service, and if not, then it becomes more of a struggle. So that gets us into the simple, moderate, and complex cases. The simple one, in which a close relative is a member of the SAR or DAR, and basically has everything documented up until these last few generations. You got the moderately difficult ones, which a more distant relative that you've discovered or heard about, or perhaps the chapter registrar discovers on looking at the SAR and DAR records, is in the SAR or DAR. And consequently, they've taken care of the more difficult areas of search, and you only need to worry about the relatively easy documentation to get. And then there's what I call the complex ones, in which the applicant comes in and isn't quite sure who the patriot ancestor is, maybe has several in mind, but does not have service records for them. And you basically got to do the whole thing. So that's what I use as the 3 different types of cases. Well, how are we currently helping prospects? National SAR has put together a number of things: preparation guide, genealogy policy committees, the instructions that come with the online application, and the national genealogy resources that are on the national website, and then the SAR genealogy helpers, which are individuals around the country. I recently signed up for it, and I see there's activity on there of people asking where can they find something, and getting helpful replies back. So the SAR has quite a bit of stuff that is available. Not always the easiest stuff to read, but it's there, and provides a great deal of help and specification. The chapter registrar also makes use of local resources, and they are, for example, the prospect, who will come in with personal information that he has, the family historian, which may be somebody in another state that has spent a lot of time collecting information, may have maybe they've collected good documentation, maybe not, but in any case, they have information which can be useful in finding documentation which is acceptable to the SAR. Other relatives, distant relatives who have posted material online, you can get some advice from previous chapter registrars of your own chapter or fellow chapter registrars in other chapters, and of course the state registrar and the state genealogist, local DAR registrars, oopsie daisy, let me go back. Also local genealogical societies. You may know someone who is a member of that. You may join that, or you know what their website is, and you can go there and get information. So there's a lot of resources that you have already, either from the national organization or from people in your vicinity. And I put this together to show the path that an application usually takes. Different states have got slightly different arrangements and so on, but in the several places that I have been, you've got a chapter registrar who advises, and currently is writing the application and maybe spends 5 hours on that. I think averages in this case are kind of silly, but it takes a while to do that. That then gets sent to the state registrar. This goes to the staff genealogists who review and annotate that, and hopefully can get it done within an hour. Goes to the genealogist general to sign, goes to the registrar to sign, and then it goes to the staff registrars. So it seems that what we might think would be the normal pattern of who reports to whom, you would think it would be chapter to state to national registrar, but in fact, the Registrar General deals with a different kind of stuff, which is keeping track of all the approved apps and the addresses of people in the organization, and the duty or the responsibility for checking over what is sent in through the chapter and state registrar falls to the genealogical area. And in many cases, you have a state registrar who is available for consultancy. And I understand some chapters have got chapter registrars as well. But I say, who's in charge in here? And I think the answer to that is, well, a lot of people contribute to the process, and we need to work together in this in order to accomplish what we are trying to accomplish, which is getting members in with sound applications. Now, one might say, gee, that's a lot of help and a lot of information, and isn't that enough? And I said, no, we really need to have a sense of flow of this from the start to the end. I think that more people need to understand the tension that we have between what the organization wants and what the prospects frequently want when they come in. And we have to recognize that it's kind of a fuzzy decision as to when excuse me, you've collected enough information that you can send it in and get it accepted. As I said before, we should welcome unacceptable documentation, which can provide leads to acceptable documentation. And what I mean by this, if we were to say, how well can we complete this in a certain amount of time? Every application, of course, is different, but usually in the beginning, you can collect information quickly and you get a certain amount. And then it takes longer and longer to find additional amounts of information. And at some point, we have what we think is a minimum that would be acceptable for approving by the staff genealogist. And there's another point in which we feel pretty comfortable that we have a lot of material there and we kind of hate to spend more time on it. But the genealogy committee's goal, of course, would be to have everything filled out and nicely documented. And in many cases, you're never going to get there. And it's the chapter registrar's duty to decide where he's going to cut this off and send it in. And the chapter registrar's goal is to get new active members. And it's a little bit in conflict with what seemed to be the committee's goal to have everything perfect. So that's one of the tensions that chapter registrars live with. So I put together the website and hope that it provides the following sorts of things. Things you can get quickly when you need them. Clickable links to many sources of documents in one place. A list of tasks for the chapter registrar, CR's chapter registrar, and the prospect during each of the 5 steps. Example emails that chapter registrar can download, alter to meet his particular needs, and send out so that he can send out sort of a form letter without having to personalize it for every applicant. And a scheme to link state resources on state SAR websites so that a person can come to this website and find out what some chapter registrar or state registrar in another state. Fields are the primary sources of information in that state. And these state SAR websites would be something that would be, state pages rather, would be something that would be kept up by the state registrar, and not something that every chapter registrar would need to worry about. Okay, what else does it do? Provides a scheme to map the data located in various documents, so you can select the best documents to submit, and so that you remember where the documentation came from. If you have several people that have provided 10 or 15 documents to you, and you've got 10 applicants that you're working with, you sort of forget where the data came from that you put down on the application. And having this scheme to map the data will help you remember where that is and locate it. And in this scheme, you writing the application and putting anything on the application until you've selected the documentation. This means you don't have to go back and change things on there and change the resources that you've listed in the reference area. And also has for information about how to fiddle with the application to fit it on two sides of a sheet of paper to send in, with the page break coming at the right place after a reference section. And I talked about example emails before about the applicant when you're welcoming him. We also have some example emails when we're talking to them about reviewing the document, and another one for the summary of fees and dues for the check, so that the applicant understands what goes into that fee and what fees he is expected to pay after the application is approved, and what he might be expected to pay next year. So that's the overview of why I put the thing together and what is supposed to be there. And we're now going to have a walk through the website. Do you have any questions at this point? I don't see any in the chat box. Well, there's one thing in the chat box. Okay. Oh dear. Okay. If you would send me information on the two links there that you had a problem with, I will deal with them. I was been going through them and thought that many of them were correct. We will be going through it this evening, and maybe you can tell me about it at that point. Okay.
Ralph.
Yes, sir.
We have one question from Chris Smithson.
Okay, Chris.
Would it be helpful for the different state societies, especially the registrars or the other people working in those states, to help you if you want to add individual state pages to what resources that we have to help better your website?
Yes. Are you talking about references for people within that state?
Correct.
Yeah. Yes, we'll get to that. That was my thought, that it would be what I've put on here are national resources or collections of information about that cover the whole country. But certainly within the states, there are resources that cover only that state and are more detailed than what's in the national resources. And I do have a place for that. And I'll show you how a couple of suggested web pages that I have to deal with that.
Okay. And the other thing was, well, one of the things that we do here in Maryland, as well as is that what I do is I normally send a intro email up first with the fees up front, and that sort of diffused it, tells the applicant up front how much it costs to join.
Yes.
Now we do have a few that see that and they go away.
That's one of the things I put in the initial letter, is a comment on what it costs per year for dues, and also what it typically costs to obtain documents if you need to get a birth certificate or a death certificate from another state. So I say it may cost $100 to get that sort of thing. And if they're unwilling to commit, I don't ask them to commit to it, but you know, if they're not willing to commit to that sort of thing, I think that would stop them from continuing. I've had very few people stop in the middle, so to speak. Usually you write them a letter and then you never hear from them again. So we do that.
Okay, we got one more question, Ralph, before you move on, from Robert from Illinois.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, guys, I'm not a full SAR member because I've been working 6 years to get one of my sperm donors documented. But I'm helping the registrar because I've done genealogy for about 20 years. And what we're running into is example like in my situation. On one route, I'm the first one in my family to have more than a third grade education. So therefore, a lot of documentation for my family I picked up from other people. Okay, once I tracked down the path where they were. Example, I had some relatives who were the mule drivers and the rednecks that dug the canal from the Ohio River up through Indiana so commerce could happen. But how I found that out was I went to another person's genealogy and they told me that.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about, you know, how you can find some of the more obscure sources such as that.
Well, and then the other situation I have is just because someone has a child that has a birth in, say, Pennsylvania, doesn't mean the records are in Pennsylvania. They're back
Right.
in South Carolina. Okay.
Yeah. We found a number of cases of that sort. I had one where the family was living in New York, but the birth was recorded in Connecticut because that's where the bride came from. And the parents wanted to make sure that their child had a record in a church somewhere. So, and sometimes the bride actually will return to go home to where the mother is, which is in a different state. So, yeah, one discovers that sort of thing is more common than you might have thought.
Well, where I'm going to now, I host a lot of Zoom sessions, up to 2,000 people. Okay,
Yeah.
but we got with Zoom, we have these breakout rooms, and I personally think I'd even pay for it. The new registrars or things like that that are interested in being trained correctly. If we had a situation where we could come to a website and go into a breakout room and like 45 minutes is all we get. And we talk to one of the experienced registrars. That opens up so much because example, one application I just completed and I thought it was golden. And the registrar's now been spending 3 weeks on it to get the right documentation that the national needs.
Yeah, well, let's continue on here. We have something similar to that, you might say, because we have the SAR helpers now, and you can send some information to them and have a chat electronic over the phone. You can have or over the web, or you can have a Zoom session with them for that matter, and chat with an experienced registrar. So we don't have capability on this particular website for having group chats, but we do have the opportunity for you to make contact with an experienced genealogist and chat with them.
Okay,
so let's go ahead. Let's go ahead with this.
But my point is to you, as an inexperienced person, where do I find that?
Well, where you find this, if you go to the chat box, you know how to turn on the chat box at the bottom of your screen. You see that?
Oh yeah, I've already chatted with one of the other fellows.
Okay,
but
well, you
I'm
see up
saying
at the top of that, the very first thing has got the website on it.
Okay.
And it's also on the first slide that I showed, and that's going to be sent out to people by Gary. So you will have that information, okay?
But the point I'm trying to make to you, until this meeting, I didn't know where to go look. And to me, there's a lot of people that aren't willing to be registrar because they don't have the time to figure out the happy path where they can go get the information.
Well, this website will solve those problems, and they will be eager to sign up. Okay. I mean, that's the hope, is that we will remove the fear factor from the chapter registrars. They can come to this site and find things easily. So let's go ahead with this, and you will see what I mean, I hope. So, as I said, the progress is broken down into 5 stages: welcoming the person, doing the research that's needed to fill in the application. And that's sort of in several blocks here. If it's a simple application or a moderate application, you don't have to do a whole lot of research. But if it's complex, then there's more to be. And we go into here and talk about organizing the information. We go into here, which has got the resources. We go into here, which discusses how you can select the best material from what you have, and then go on to writing the application, signing and sending it, and rejoicing. So at the beginning, a little bit about me, a little bit about why and how the chapter registrar creates success. I talked about a little bit previously. And then this talks about how you can do your job efficiently, goes over the 5 stages, and then it refers to the national policies. You can click here and get both of those. And talks a little bit about what's in those that might be useful for the introductory process, the welcoming process. And then we start with stage 1 here. And we have an example email for welcoming new prospect. I'll just show you what one of these things look like. This would be something you would attach it to an email to the prospect. So it's generic. And in yellow and brackets here, I've got what you would put in when you type this up for use in your own chapter. But you talk a little bit about what the particular chapter does in terms of meeting and special events that they put on. They have color guidesmen and so on. Talk about the magazines you get at the chapter, state, and national level. And what do we do? And talk about what the chapters do in terms of meeting, honoring public safety officers, history teachers, and so on, the contests that we run, showing them their money will be put to good purpose. And this is not just dues to keep the certificate from falling off the wall, but we actually do things, unlike some organizations, and you can be proud to be part of that doing. And then it talks about what the chapter registrar will do, and in assisting the applicant and writing the application, and then what's expected of them as a prospect, and the cost, as Chris brought up, is in here. The application fee plus the annual fees and dues in there. So, and I asked them to send the information that we're going to need for the contact information part of the application. So the new chapter registrar doesn't have to think, what am I going to put into my first email to the applicant? We have something, canned one there that he can modify as necessary for that chapter and send out. And we talk about what the registrar does during the welcoming process, and setting up a computer folder and so on. In there, if you want, there's a form to log your hours, so you can say how many hours you worked on it, how much you spent on it, in case your chapter is reimbursing you for costs of postage and that sort of thing, copying. Also, at this point, you need to take some time to determine what the likely path is to completion. And I don't want you to try and read all this stuff because it's on the website. You can read that later. We're just kind of walking through it to see what general material is there. One of the things you need to think about is if there's a DAR and SAR application in there, when was it filed? And if it was filed prior to the cutoff dates that we have for the SAR and the DAR, you need to look at the earlier application and see whether the documentation is likely to be acceptable by staff genealogists now, current standards, or whether there's some weakness in there that you may have to patch up somehow. If they don't have a SAR or DAR application to base it on, then you have to look into the question of whether the proposed Patriot is going to be easy to document or not so easy to document. The general recommendation, of course, is to pick the easiest one and to have the applicant put in the others as supplementals later on. Sometimes that's a hard sell for the prospect, but nevertheless, it makes your life easier and the prospect's life easier if you can get the application done fairly rapidly rather than a long time. Okay, so now we'll move on to research. And now we break it into the three different cases. The simple case is one where a close relative is a member there, and we talk about issues that there might be with birth certificates. And we talk a little bit, we have links for acquiring the SAR or DAR record copies. And this goes to a page which has got a direct link to the place where you can request a record copy. It tells you how much it costs. And similarly for the DAR. So again, in terms of training a new chapter registrar, this takes the burden off of the other people in the chapter. The previous chapter registrar may have moved to another state and no longer be available to tell them all these things, but all this material is here with the link, direct link to the place where you can get that information. So with the simple case, you can skip all the rest of the research stuff and go directly to writing up the application. And I won't do that now, but the link here will take them directly to that and skip over all the stuff about how you do research and finding obscure documents and writing proof arguments. So in the moderate case, you've got a little bit more work to do. And you talk with the prospect about that. And you talk about focused research. Let them know that we're trying to document a couple of things: acceptable patriotic service and child to parent links. And thirdly, to get enough vital data for those people in the lineage to be relatively sure that the people you are listing on there are the right people with that name. So it's not family history. And at this point, you raise the issue about electronic copies. I personally like to do these things with PowerPoint because it's easy to modify those things and erase things and put things back. Whereas if you're working with Xerox copies of things, erasing things and writing new things in becomes messy. And so I find it a lot easier to do electronic copies. You can do it either way, but just my preference. So I discuss a little bit about what you might ask for in the way of an electronic document. And if you're expecting to have more than 10 of those files, you need to have a procedure for labeling them so that you find them and what's in them. And also make a log file for that so that you've got all of them listed in one place and can figure out what's going on. Then we get into the question of what is submissible, what's acceptable, I should say, by the staff genealogist and what is not. And here we talk about how you can acquire the vital records. Well, that'd be the birth, marriage, and death records. And that's on another page here, which tells you that, first of all, where they're kept, typically by the county clerk or registrar of deeds, and also how you can get them. And one place that covers many states is called Vital Check, and it costs you more money to go through them to get the vital record. But on the other hand, it will save you a certain amount of time and frustration to do that. And another place you might go is the Family Search Wiki, which is helpful for finding where you can get that information online. Okay, so that's the moderate case. And again, after you've collected that data, you can go to the write-up section. So the last part is the complex case. And we really don't have a lot of space on here to cover the complex case. It's down at the bottom of the page here. So that's on a separate page. And so you can click on that and go directly to that page 2A, which is the same thing as clicking on it up here. So we can go back and forth and research complex in here. And again, emphasize copying all kinds of documents is what you want to collect, whether they're acceptable or not acceptable. They can be useful to you in finding good documents. And as I said, you need to have a plan for naming these things so that you can, if after working on 3 other applicants, you can come back to this applicant who maybe has been off studying things for a month or so, and you need to become refamiliar with the files for that applicant. It's helpful if name, which will kind of clue you in as to which document it is and who it's for and what it covers. So I have a little page here on naming them for efficiency, and it starts with the year and then the type of document that it is. And then what I call a hook here, and what I use for the hook is the name of the focus person. So if it's the birth certificate for Charlie Brown, you know, you put Charlie down here. You don't need to put Brown down because you know which what the main names are in the lineage back to the Patriot. And so using the first name is sufficient for you to determine which generation that they're in. And for example, if you've got a birth certificate, you might say something like 1951 BC Michael. And if 1960 census for California, you might say 1860 Sen Harold as the head of the household now. And for probate record, you know, something like 1847 PROB. And if it's not one of the people in the lineage, but it's a brother or sister and might be useful for a proof argument, then you can indicate who that is by saying it's Nathan's brother. Okay, if Nathan's in the lineage. So I give examples of the things in there. And then if you're going to be getting into a complicated case where you're going to have 10, 20, 30 documents, it's convenient to have something shorter than the file ID to put down next to some information that you're writing. And so I have a short ID that one can use, and that can be made up any way you want to make it. I usually do them AA, AB, AC, and so on. And then the third thing that you might have, that you're going to need to have when you're putting in the reference section, is the citation, or you might call it the full citation, and that gets to be a long thing, and we don't need to deal with specifying that at this point. So when you're making up a list, which I call the log docs spreadsheet, if you're making up a list of the documents that you're collecting, you start at the top of the page and you put the first one in that you found, and then the second one in that you found. You don't need to worry about putting them in a particular order. But want to put those two things in at the beginning, and then later on you can write the citation. So that's the beginning of our organizational effort. And the second thing is, if you're going to have a complex application, you're going to be getting a lot of documents. You're going to be getting things from the person that says, well, family history tells me such and such, and they'll send you in sheets of this, that, and the other thing. They'll also say, well, there's a website information on this, so you might want to get that information as well. And you may have some census records, some birth certificates. You're going to get a mix of things. And so the question is remembering which of these documents has got the birth date on it. Which of these documents has got the parent's name? Is it the full name or only a part name? And this sort of thing. So I said for this, what we want to do is to have what I call a multi-generational spreadsheet. And I note in these things, this is the author's method, is not a guideline. You can organize things however you find best. This is just something that I have done, that I developed, that I think is useful. And so you're free to modify it without anybody in the SAR complaining about it. But as with any spreadsheet, what you have is a number of columns and a number of rows. Well, the columns in this case stand for the short ID that I talked about before, and then the type of document that it is. And then I have another column, which we're going to really make use of later on, but don't need now, which tells what's the fate of that document, whether it's a document we're going to keep or a document that we're going to ignore, one that's redundant, one that's not acceptable, excluded because it's not acceptable to the SAR. We'll put that information in here, but then the generation. And then after that, we have the information on birth name and information on birth date, birthplace, death date, death place, marriage date, marriage place, all the things that are on the SAR application. But you don't need to put down what the specific date is. All you want to say is that this document contains that date, and you can put down date, month, DMY. You can put down those letters to indicate that it does have the information, or you could put down dash MY to say it has only the month and the year, but not the date. So you can tell from this whether it's got the town and the county, or the place for the wedding or the death, so on in there. Now, each row of that spreadsheet is going to be about a particular incident or event. So for a birth of a person, generation 1, you'd have the birth name, the birth date, and so on. And you might also have yet another one that was a birth information. This might be a birth announcement. This might be a birth record itself. You would then have, for the parent, you might have first, middle, and last names, and you might have the place where the parent came from. So you'd say, in this case, 2 dashes, doesn't have the town, doesn't have the county, but it has the state for those. So just by looking at this thing, you can tell which documents have the information that you want for what particular person. And you don't need to go through the hassle of filling out an application and going and erasing things and writing new things in as you get better data. You just put all data on here, and when you decide which is the best data, then you copy it. Then you go back to the document, and you can copy from the document onto the application and ignore all the other things that you didn't choose as the best application. So we're at the stage now just of collecting data. So you go through and you collect all of this information in that fashion. And this helps you easily go in and look and see whether you're missing things for a particular generation, because you can sort this thing so all of the 1s show up and then all of the 2s show up. And you can see whether you've got birth, marriage, and death for that generation or not. And Chris, right there, yeah, you get all this. Okay, so that's a recommended way of getting that information. So Now let's go to the resources, which is of great interest. Now, where can you get patriotic service? Well, obviously you can get it from the SAR, the DAR. Fold 3, which is a wonderful resource, has got lots and lots of stuff, and the pension application files on that are free. And you need a subscription either to that or to Ancestry to access the other databases, which can be quite useful, but there is a big block of that which is free. That's the pension application records. We also have the SAR has been very active in this area, and some years ago published in the Patriot Roster Project, they got 905 applications, or 905 publications, excuse me. And those are books. And you say, well, okay, what good is a book? Well, a lot of books you can find online via Google Books, and many of those are free. And you can also look in the World Catalog and find out which is the nearest library that has got a copy of that book. So you can find out whether your city or some other city has got that. And these were put together by Mr. compatriot Ostendorf, who's professional librarian, and described what he did as a search for that. And then I can just give you an example of the sort of thing you find there. And many of these things are journals of particular individuals. A soldier at Valley Forge, and so there are a lot of things here that you would not find in Ancestry or Fold 3, but contain a great deal of information. There are collections in here that were put together by the DAR and various states. And in addition to having a breakdown by type, journals, for example, or foreign nations, also has a breakdown by state. If we go to Ohio, you'll see a list here that was put together for the Benjamin Franklin chapter. In here is an annotated biography of patriots. So there are a large number of things. This covered up through 1993, I think it was. It tells you at the beginning, but obviously it's not up to date immediately, but it's got a lot of information. Another one by the daughter of the American Revolution. So there are 905 different records, and should be very useful. Then we talk about the parent to child links that you can get. And again, we go to the Family Search Wiki main page, which tells you where to go in the various states. And this is Family Search will give you historical records. And Library of Congress has got US newspapers for 3,800 newspapers. Tremendous amount of information is available directly just by clicking on the links here. And again, in going through estate records and court records, get a lot of those things. Down at the bottom of the page, I put in what Chris was talking about as far as the state websites might be concerned. The state could put together something like North Carolina, and we could link to the state website page that has that. And if you wanted to talk about the changes in county boundaries in North Carolina, there's a website for that. The initial land grants in North Carolina, they had to, during the Revolutionary War, you had to swear an oath of allegiance, and so it counts as patriotic service. So if you've got someone from North Carolina from that period of time, they might have gotten land. And if they were an officer, they'd get bounty land. And so it describes that. So that's the sort of thing that states could put together to be helpful to people from other states. Okay, so now that we got all this information, we need to select it. And I'm not going to go into detail on this. Sometimes you can just sort of look at here and see that that's right. And then you say, okay, it's a vital record, and we want to keep that. And this one is redundant, so you wouldn't keep that. And so on. Here you might want to keep it for the marriage information, and the wife's birth information, because that information is sometimes available on a marriage certificate. So at any rate, you can look at the spreadsheet that you've got and do that. Come to the conclusion of what's the best documentation. Writing a proof argument you've talked about in other places. I summarize that here and mention it can be found in the SAR application preparation guide. So now that we've selected the data that we're going to, or the documentation that we're going to use, you can go on to write the application. And the first thing you need to do is to mark up the documentation and talk about the SAR guide for that. Manual markup is fine. I prefer computer aided markup, and talk about how you can do it, the markup, and give some examples. For example, birth certificate in which you would underline various things and put the generation number that it refers to out here. And in the upper right hand corner, put the last name of the applicant and the number, the generations to which this document refers. So we have examples for those things. In the case of the tombstone.
Ralph,
Yes, sir.
those first two links on that previous page there are the links that I have indicated are broken.
Yeah,
The guidelines and the marking up by computer.
Oh. Okay, I will note that. So that's on stage 3.
I put a note in the chat for you, Ralph.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And okay. At any rate, so there's some examples on there. What I guess I showed in here. Sometimes you don't use red because it doesn't show up very well. So I use yellow here. I think the objective of this was to have something that was distinctive on there, and not necessarily to be red. Okay, so now that you've marked up the documentation, you've selected the documentation, you marked it up. Now you can start writing the application up. And this tells you a little bit about how to get to the member page. Again, for your new chapter registrar, when you don't have the old chapter registrar around, this will tell them how to get in there and do it. And it notes the fact that the preparation guide tells us about other kinds of plans. And we're not going to talk about those because that, you know, it's already talked about. Mention the error in the applicant data section. And then say, well, okay, now you go ahead to fill on generations and emphasize they use the right field formats, and you cite the sources clearly, and you have some examples of the citation, Patriot service information. I'm moving around a little bit here because I got a camera in front of my screen. At any rate. And also talk about how to fit the application to the page. Well, I haven't gotten to that yet. All right. We're still filing information on the patent. Also keep the applicant informed of what's going on, because it's his application, and he needs to go through it and check it. I make typos from time to time, and it's easier for the applicant to catch them than it is for me. So again, we've got applicant tasks down there that they're supposed to do. And when you're finished with that, you go to section 4. And in section 4 is the final review up here. You may want to put in a DAR finder form. And you as a chapter registrar are supposed to review the application requirements and sign the checklist. We all grind our teeth at this point, but anyway, that's it. And then there's discussion in here of how you can fit the material on the page so that it breaks at the right point, and you may need to change the magnification. You may need to move around on the page, and there's information on doing that. Also, the example notification of the check and signing process. I usually put in little thing like this, which tells how much for the father, how much for the son, total is due with the application up here. In our cases, we bill them for dues after approval. The father was a regular member, pays dues. The son was a junior member and does not need to pay dues. And similarly for what's going to be expected of them in future years, I've got it on here. So again, you got a kind of a form letter so that you don't need to write something new for every applicant that comes down the pike on that. So you get finished, and here are the prospect tasks down there: reviewing, corrections, check, write the check, sign the application, wait patiently. And when it's finished, we hope that you can rejoice. So we get something here, and they have an email welcoming the new compatriot in. And I said, in the unlikely event that an application is not approved, then we've got information for dealing with the pending application. And I've only had a couple of pending applications out of the 120 or so that I've sent in. So we can hope that the other person won't. So anyway, that's the what we have for the site. And I have one more thing I would like to go to. And that's this one, the summary chart as to where we are in this and what you're going to remember. Probably shouldn't have used a crown because we kicked the king out, but at any rate, what will you remember? Chapter registrars are vital, have 3 categories, 5 stages of application, a lot of useful external links on it. The goal is membership, not perfection. And unacceptable sources are really okay, useful, helpful. So don't just discard them out of hand. And then some tips on organizing the files, naming them and evaluating them so that it's easy. Find out where the best information is, and then how to fit the application to the page. So that's pretty much the whole thing. And I don't know if we have any time for any questions at this point, but if you've got questions, I see there are 14 things in the chat, and I have not been looking at the chat. But Gary, you said you were going to look into that.
One of the things that was talked about most was a lot of folks use the generation and number in front of their documents when they're storing them on their computer. So
Yeah, and I've done that also, and that's fine. I think the main objective is that you ought to be organized about it, not that
right.
This way is the best way. This is a way.
Can you put the website link up again on chat? It seems that it didn't work for at least one fellow.
Okay, yeah, I have it here.
There it is. David Bennett just put it up. Okay, we've got a couple of hands up. Brian Jensen from Brevard. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Brian.
Okay. Yeah, I've got three, I'll call them concerns. One is we're dealing with, for the most part, 13 call-in for our proof of service and where we're getting our documents from the Patriot and maybe the next generation down at least. Is there any way to have links to those 13 colonies with their each, or not colonies, but 13 states now that they are states, is have a link to each state resources that's available for that state on the national site? The other or second one I've got is the SAR helper. If we can get that put on the site, it'd be appreciated. And then my third one is if we've got an old application and we can use generations 1 through 4, I believe, up to the grandparent. Can we, and although that application does go back farther, can we use that application within those 4 generations as part of the documentation, and then the genealogists back at National, if they do have any questions, they can say, well, here's a roadmap where this prior application went, and it's already, it's already linked to the first or to 4 generations, and it may go back to a 5th or 6th, but at least there's a roadmap there in case there is a hiccup between the registrar and the genealogist at National.
Yeah, any of the information that is on that application that is backed up with documentation that is acceptable nowadays would be okay. So you could use for the grandparents and great grandparents, if the birth certificates and census records and so on are acceptable, you could certainly use those, and then you would simply add documentation to make up for an earlier generation that was based on a family tree or something like that, which is no longer acceptable. And you could put in something that is acceptable, and that would be fine.
Okay. Yeah.
As far as this question about the 13 states is concerned, I listed somewhere here. Yeah. Are we still screen sharing? I guess we're still screen sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see I got Connecticut here, and certainly people from Connecticut could make up a website would be more extensive than this. They would have a lot of information that was, specific to Connecticut, and might or might not be in the national websites, and might or might not be free. I mean, you go to Ancestry perhaps to get this information, but you have to pay money to belong to Ancestry in order to get it. And on the other hand, it's available directly from the Connecticut Historical Society.
Yeah, and I believe there's,
They click on that.
turn
So
back one page,
I know it's not found. Okay, that's
Yeah.
not helpful anyway.
go back one page.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, but, we've got Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
North Carolina, New York, Pennsylvania. New Hampshire has a archive page, and there's probably others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just put a couple of the
And-
things that I
right.
personally knew about up here. And the problem with these things is that they will, whoever it was that put it up may change it. And if you're in Connecticut, you're more likely to find it and change it than if it's on a national website. And I put this particular part together a couple of years ago, and I'm hoping that one of these things at least works. Yeah, Connecticut State Library. So
Okay, yeah, but yeah, if we could get that on the national side,
Okay,
that would
got
help out
hands raised.
tremendously to a lot of others.
yeah, and
Okay,
the hope
I'm
would
done.
be that
Yep.
the hope would be that the individual states would put up a page and they would maintain that page. So they'd more easily be able to be aware of the fact that the URL has changed and fix it.
Controls are down here.
Okay, Chris, you got your hand up again?
Yes. One of the big things that I think Ralph sort of touched on it a little bit was keeping a log of I've been doing this for over 20 years, is keeping a log of the people that you're working with. So that if anything happens, that you keep it on a flash drive or something, that if you change positions, that way you can hand it over to the next person. Also, if you're keeping actual people's files, keep them in like a banker's box. That way you can hand it over to the next person. There's a lot of when I took over for Hawaii, we had in the registrar step down, it's making sure that you're having a transfer of the information that you need, so you know what applications are pending from national, what applications are still being processed, what applications did the person have in their own possession that they're still being worked on. So you have an idea of how much stuff you have to work with. So you could have a lot, if you have a chapter where you have a very large populated area of inquiries, Like, for example, in North Carolina, maybe there's a lot coming into the Raleigh area, or in Georgia, there's a lot coming into the Atlanta area. So that way you're prepared with what you need to do.
Yeah, I have something of that sort here, which kind of lists where we are in here. I've got a series of numbers in here indicating, I don't lose it. I got numbers from 1 to 10 there, which says where they are. And in terms of whether we're working on the ancestor lineage, whether we've got a lot to do or a little bit to do, they're close to signing and sent in and so on. So yeah, and I did not include that in this particular thing. You say, why didn't I include it? I don't know. I didn't think of it, but you're right. I could perhaps put that in there.
The other thing that I think Gary can send back out is, I'm the one that has the application helper Google group.
Right.
Which, for those of you, Gary can send that email back out because it has a specific link to it. There's now about over 30 or close to 40 people that are on that, between 30 and 40 people now that subscribe to that. You can post queries of where you're looking for stuff, whether you need help. I think another thing, the gentleman from Illinois, that's something that we need to do in the near future, is to have breakout rooms for those of us that have done bulk of applications, can assist and work with the different chapters across the nation to make sure that they have the resources that they need.
Yeah, and I have that in here somewhere. And what I suggested was that people contact the state registrar to get that information, because I didn't want to put it on here because although this is a sort of semi-hidden site at the moment, ultimately it will become more widely used, and I didn't want to have you bothered by everybody and his cousin writing to you for the assistance.
Okay. Harry Rinker, welcome back to the States.
Thank you very much, Gary. I had a great 2 weeks in Europe. I did take my computer with me, and my wife swears if I do that again on my next vacation, we're getting divorced. But anyway, look, this has been a very interesting and a fascinating presentation to me. There's only one criteria involved in this one, however, which I think someday we have to address differently. And that is, this assumes that all our potential registrars are computer illiterate and computer skilled.
Well, yeah.
And to be perfectly honest with you, I've had a lot of experience with registrars that do not have the capability to even understand what we've just gone through. And at some point, we're going to have to, it's just my suggestion, have to develop a course for the computer illiterate registrar.
Yeah, and I think having a single site that provides a lot of that information makes it easier for somebody who's not particularly computer literate to get on here and do things. As I say, you don't really have to mark them up by computer. You don't really need to have a spreadsheet to map out the data. You can we've managed for years without that. So I think we can continue to do that. But yeah, I had somewhere in here, I had the other people helping with the genealogy, and I'm not quite sure where it went at the moment. But as far as I mentioned it at the beginning about the genealogy helpers, and somehow it, I may have thought about it and not put it in here. I don't know. Anyway,
It's on your slideshow.
yeah, I've added that. Yeah, it was on the slideshow, but that's not part of the website. So I'd like to make it part of the website, and I thought it was, but no, I'll have to go and find it.
Okay.
Be more
Okay, do we have any other comments or questions? We're getting close to an hour and 20 minutes working.
Yes, Joey Blackman, Atlanta Registrar.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Ralph, you had started, had mentioned in the very beginning there, the 4 registrar positions there. There was a registrar general, and I missed the second one. You said, I think the state, or I'm sorry, staff registrar. Is that correct?
Right.
Is that in, is the staff registrar, is that in the headquarters there, or?
Yes, yes. The staff registrars are people in headquarters who keep track of where people's addresses are, what they paid dues, whether they paid dues or not. You know, going back and when they die, they take that information in as well. So they keep track of members after they become members. But before they become members, they have to go through, the application goes through the genealogy staff. But those are all headquarters people.
So generally, if I want to call some about, since I have a Georgia concern, I would ask for a Georgia staff registrar if I needed.
Yeah, I don't think they're broken up by state. So I mean, they have a staff of 5 maybe that take care of everybody in the country.
Well, okay.
Let's adjust that. There's one registrar and his assistant. Jonathan Toon is the registrar. He has an assistant that helps him.
Only one?
Okay.
There's only one.
I think I talked with Jonathan. He was real helpful though. As when I was getting.
There are 8 genealogy staff members, so that's where you're getting the multiple staff members. But there's only one registrar.
Okay, sir. And one other question I had, if you don't take a minute here, is proof argument. And I just saw that I actually filled out on the an application that's on the application preparation site, and it looked like somebody had what was the application stated was very brief argument there. Can you just take a minute or two just tell me, this is new to me to see something proof argumentation or argument on a application. That's not where you start, is it?
Now, you would use a proof argument when you haven't got documentation that supports what you need to support. And you would have secondary proofs that support your argument, but they're not direct. They're not getting you a direct connection maybe from one generation to the next, but you have a lot of hints from other different documents, and you want to prove that that connection is there, what your reasoning is. You've got to be able to think of a proof argument as talking to your mother to get so you can go out to play. And you're going to argue with her about why it's a good idea for you to do that. And so you've got to have documentation to say that. So that proof argument would be a last step, but it may be the most important step if you can't find any actual documentation to connect.
Okay.
Yeah, you typically find 2 or 3 documents that go together well to when you can't find the information in a single document. I give one example on here, and in the application preparation manual, they give several more complicated ones.
Okay, that caught my eye. I generally get the ones that are not showing on the regular radar, so it's a little bit of a concern I have, but I'm working through that. So thank you very much, there, Ralph.
You're welcome. Yeah, if you go to the website and in section 2C, I guess that was, I've got something on writing a proof argument. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a simple one. As I say, there's more on that in the application preparation guide.
Okay, I'll look to that. Thank you.
Okay, Ralph, I appreciate you stepping up to the plate and offering this concept for everybody. it gives a different viewpoint than what we've had for maybe the last 6 weeks. And I look at this as being the prequel to being a chapter registrar. You've got to have the information how to even get started. And this is what I'm hoping is going to give a fellow the step up. So thank you very much, Ralph. Appreciate your effort. We will probably not have a meeting until December. So if you have concepts or things that you want to discuss, if you could send them to me by email or call or whatever way you can get in touch with me so that I can try to set it up in December. My goal is to have a periodic forum, if you will, for when we can ask questions and get them answered. This last 6-7 weeks has been an excellent discussion opportunity, and I really do appreciate everybody jumping out. Bill Schwecke, I'm going to throw you under the bus. Do you have anything else to add to this discussion tonight?
Nothing more to add.
Okay.
Can I just jump in and just remind everybody, if you want the chat, open the chat and go to the ellipsis that's in the lower right-hand corner. Click on it and you'll save everything, because once this meeting is over, the chat will disappear. If you do that, you'll get it it'll go into a document, in a folder in your documents file, and you'll have all the links and all of the questions and all the answers that were posed tonight. I just like to remind everybody to do that.
And if you click on the 3 dots, it's the top entry is save the chat.
I think for us, there's only one choice. You're the host, so you have other choices, but I think we only have one choice.
Okay.
Save the chat.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate your participation, and I will try to get this recorded and get it out so folks can look at it on their own time. But we had about 60 folks catch up after we just led them a different direction. Next time I'll give you one direction where you're headed. So thank you very much. Appreciate the night. Everybody be safe for Thanksgiving. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Sure.